Co-main event. I don't even know what to say about this one. I think that this is a scary fight for both guys because it's just hard to see either of them lose after all the work they've put into their UFC careers, right? You gotta be honest with yourself and say that with a guy like Beneil Dariush, man, if he doesn't pull off this win, I think the UFC is going to make him work really hard to get back into the title picture. And I don't think that's a knock on him, right? I think that's just business as usual. I think that's just business as usual where he's not the kind of guy that's like hella sellable for them. But, in terms of earning it, I personally don't think that he earned a title shot just yet. I think this is the perfect fight. When it comes to the 155 division, you have to fight one of these guys to get a chance at gold. There's no question. There's a long lineup. Justin Gaethje, Tony Ferguson. These are all the guys that are kind of your gatekeepers at the moment, and they deserve to touch gold too. So Beneil Dariush coming out of the Diego Ferreira, showdown that they've had, he obviously did that in a much more dominant fashion than the first one. And you look at the knockouts that he's had, straight dad strength, coming out of the Kai Kara France discussion, but once these men are having children, it's like they're becoming brand new fighters. I think you're seeing the resilience in Dariush legitimately inside the octagon. There's moments where you can tell that, he's probably not happy with himself and some of the decision making he's doing, but he's getting better at that. He looks like he's being able to pick his shots later in the fights when he's actually learning his opponent's range, gauging distance. That's where I'm actually really, really impressed with some of the improvements we've seen from Beneil, because that gauge of distance as a guy who's so good on the ground is what makes him such an exciting fighter now. I think that's where he's changing that narrative of not being one of those guys that's sellable, because guess what? If he pulls off one of those knockouts against a guy like Tony Ferguson, yeah, you could bet your bottom dollar that the UFC is going to try to get him a title shot as soon as they possibly can, because that's a guy that they're going to be excited to see fight. You go into Tony Ferguson's loss to Charles Oliveira. I mean, that first round was absolutely everything, right? Charles Oliveira pretty much destroyed that arm. It looks like it was compromised for the rest of the fight. And I think Tony did what he could to kind of come away with that win, but Charles Oliveira did what he had to do to kind of get that title shot. He's been hungry for a long time, and I think Tony's in a position now where he can kind of let go of that record that he put together. It was everybody just kept talking about it because it was the way to get him and Khabib into the octagon. And now you have the opportunity for him to do kind of a fresh slate in terms of just chasing that last opportunity at UFC Gold. I think that he has a really good chance in this fight if he avoids taking crazy damage, right? Don't play into Beneil's game. I think that his style is always considered the most unique, and it's really hard to adapt to. So keep him guessing. Use some kicks, I think both guys have very, very interesting striking styles, which makes this such an unorthodox fight, bar none, across the entire card. But they're grappling styles, right? That's where I'm really interested to see what happens. If this fight goes to the ground, I think Beneil Dariush has some of that traditional BJJ game to kind of give Tony a run for his money. But then you have the Tonys of the world that have really, really interesting, jiu-jitsu under their belt. And I think that this is where you're going to see two guys who can roll really well. And Tony's always been able to get himself out of, harm's way. So if he's able to withstand some of the early, barrages of Beneil Dariush, this is going to be a hard-fought battle, I think, for 3 rounds. And when you look at the last fight with Ferreira and Dariush, I think that he cannot allow Ferguson to get any momentum in this fight, because the one thing about Tony is he's just always riding the heart. Like he never gives up, man. And I think that if he has any momentum on his side, it's just really hard to put him away. And in this case, when you're a guy that's starting to get, really noticed for the power shots and getting, I guess, addicted to knocking people out, this is a guy that gets really hard to knock out as the fight goes on. And so, when you look at the Gaethje fight, despite all the damage he was doing, the guy just kept coming forward, and they just had to end the fight and just let Tony know, listen, man, I can't let this keep going anymore. And I think that there's an opportunity here for Beneil to do the same thing within 3 rounds if he's finding success early on, but not knocking him out. Now, for Tony, it's kind of similar stuff, right? Don't take these big shots, man. Avoid the damage. We love seeing you fight, but I think avoiding the damage is part of the game, and he just takes too many shots, but he's able to land, man. And in that Justin fight, you could see him getting some things off, but Justin was just way quicker. He was just the better athlete, and then I think that the footwork was too much for Tony. And in this fight, he has to be the guy with the footwork. I think that he has to get back to his old ways of just constantly moving and making his opponent guess, because I think that outside of that, in those traditional ways of fighting, Beneil Dariush is very sound. And I think that it's going to be tough to kind of throw him off of his game if you're not, showing him looks that he can't really, have to gauge and guess and really take some time to figure out how things look coming out the other side, because, you know, I think Diego Ferreira had issues with that. I think by the time that second round rolled around, Beneil Dariush had a pretty good understanding of how he had to land and made him tired. And both these guys are just so close in terms of just, you know, their actual styles and the way they fight. You know, 59% striking defense across the board for both of them. So I think I want to see Tony not take as much damage for just the love of the game. But it's hard for me to go against Beneil Dariush right now, because you see what he's been able to put together, and you have to kind of tell yourself that Tony's not the same fighter we saw put together that massive record. So as much as I want to say that this should be closer to a pick'em, it's hard not to lean towards the Beneil Dariush side as a favorite. I think that has to be the way you go. His all-around game is just really something to marvel, and I think Tony is getting there in age, and he's just taking on absolute beasts. And unless that, you know, a guy like Charles Oliveira, who's able to take him to the ground and exploit him in that sense, like if you want to stay standing, like, you know, we're seeing him lose in multiple areas against the best fighters, and a guy like Dariush is showing that he can do both. It's just a really tough fight for Tony, and I think that people might be sleeping on Dariush in that sense. But looking at the lines, like I actually thought that Dariush should be close to that minus 200 range, but he's coming at that minus 170, minus 180 range. You know, you got Tony at that plus 140. Some guys giving you plus 150. You know, I think he's got areas that he can win this fight in, but at the same time, it does seem very finite for him because of what we've seen, the diminishing skills on his end versus some of the guys that are, you know, fighting for titles. It's not that Tony can't win these fights. It's more that we're seeing guys kind of learn how to break him down and withstand some of the pressure that he brings, because Tony was the guy with the pressure. Tony was the guy that was throwing big shots and the guy you couldn't put away, and the guy that was making, you know, the comebacks that everybody couldn't believe. So now we're seeing fighters that are just able to do it more consistently and avoid giving up that momentum shift and giving up that comeback. So if Dariush is able to do the same thing, which, you know, you look at his body of work and how he kind of becomes a new fighter come second, third round, it's tough to really go against him. And I think the lines suggest that as well. Going to be probably the most exciting fight on the card, bar none. You know, if it goes 3 rounds, I don't think there's going to be a more exciting fight